Zoombinis is a 25-year-old children's game about teaching maths and logic, and if that doesn't sound fun to you, you're right, it's not. Zoombinis first appeared in 1996 with the release of Logical Journey of the Zoombinis. You will be hard-pressed to find a self-proclaimed 90s kid who doesn't somehow remember that one minigame where you make pizzas for the trees. It's buried deep within our collective subconscious, along with Jelly Shoes and the theme song for the TV show Extreme Dinosaurs. What you may have forgotten, however, is there's a lot more to this game than just making pizzas. In fact, the pizza making comprises a tiny part of the overall experience. Today, we're going to talk about all of it. This is the deepest analysis into Zoombinis you'll find anywhere on the internet. Strap yourselves in, because I'm about to blow this whole thing wide open. When you first start the game, you're presented with a cutscene showcasing the day-to-day life of the Zoombinis. They live on an island in the middle of the sea, and are shown to be very competent traders. It's honestly quite impressive how much they get done without hands. As we watch the Zoombinis load boxes onto a ship, we don't get told where that ship is going or who they're trading with, but I have some theories that I'll be getting into later. It's safe to say that the Zoombinis are getting on fine. That is, until the Bloats arrive. We never get a good look at the Bloats, but I'm 91% sure they're an allegory for the British Empire. Soon the Zoombinis are rounded up and forced to do the same job, but this time under the Bloats, which I assume is worse. You can tell that things are worse than they were before because the Bloats have spears and also the Zoombinis are being kept in pens. It's not a good time. Seeing no other option, the Zoombinis decide it's time for them to head off to somewhere else. Just like in the biblical Exodus, the Zoombinis divide themselves into groups of 16 and sneak off ship by ship. Before we go into detail about the specific challenges that the Zoombinis have to overcome, let's just briefly talk about them as creatures. No matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find any examples in the game of Zoombinis reproducing, which has led me to the conclusion that they're not technically alive. Perhaps these twisted little freaks are actually the cruel experiment of a mad scientist, or maybe they've simply always existed. Regardless, they're very strange. If I was forced to pick the one defining quality of a Zoombini, it is the individuality that occurs within the species. Just like with humans, each Zoombini is different, and just like with humans, there are precisely 625 different combinations of hair, eyes, feet, and nose colour. As part of my research into the Zoombini, I've decided that the optimal Zoombini looks like this. With just a few strands of hair, it's easier to make out the Zoombini's smooth domed head. The shades let us know that this Zoombini is a cool customer. The propeller gives the Zoombini the power of flight, making it strictly better than any other variant of Zoombini. As for nose colour, that comes down to personal preference, although I find that red and blue are a bit too common, yellow's a bit too garish, so I'd go for pink or green if you have the chance. As your ship full of twisted blue freaks lands on the mainland, you will find yourself encountering some racist bridges. Technically it's not the bridges that are racist, it's the cliffs, but it feels like the bridges are in on it. Any attempts to teach the bridges a lesson about acceptance will be greeted by the cliffs sneezing and sending your Zoombini flying back. This sneeze will also dislodge one of the posts that's holding the bridges up. If all the posts fly out, the bridges will fall into the cliff's face. Watching the cliffs struggle with the bridges in their face is actually my favourite part of this minigame, so it's sometimes worth making sure at least one Zoombini gets left behind. Great, we're past the bridges. Our days of sorting Zoombinis are over, you say. Wrong. Completely wrong. The next minigame is basically the same thing, with the main difference being you have these obnoxious rocks. I hate these rocks, I hate their voices, and I hate the things they say.
I must be careful about who I let in.
The fact that there's no way to circumvent these obnoxious little is definitely a strike against this game in general. Anyway, once you get past them, you get to the real minigame, the one we actually came here to see.
Make me a pizza!
There's a reason everyone remembers the pizza minigame, and it's because it's just objectively the best one. It's basically just a trial and error minigame where you figure out which toppings these three trolls like and then assemble the perfect pizza and or ice cream combination for them. If you take too long getting the right combinations, the trolls will start slapping your Zoombinis about, but you would have to be a literal child to not be able to pass this minigame every time. There are two key things about this minigame that make it the best one. Firstly, it doesn't have anything to do with splitting your Zoombinis up according to their appearances. And secondly, you get to press buttons on the pizza machine and then a pizza comes out. Wild. At this point in the game, the path splits in two, and you're given the option of which way you want to go. I'm going to briefly and concisely explain why going the top way is rubbish. The first minigame has this extra from the Princess and the Frog trying to get your Zoombinis all to sit together, and they have to sit next to someone who matches them, and honestly it's not fun at all. The only redeeming quality of this minigame is when the frog guy says this.
There you go, you got it.
That's it, that's the only thing I like about this minigame. Shortly after, you encounter this amphibious hellscape where you have to figure out which frogs can go down which paths of lily pads, and they take ages. There's no option to speed them up, so you're going to be playing this for minimum 5 to 8 minutes every single time. This minigame alone is the reason that I avoid the top route every time when possible. The only reason I ever did the top route was to unlock some harder difficulties, and it was not worth it. Once you're through that nightmare, you have to order some Zoombinis on pillars so that when the pillars go up, all the Zoombinis stay on the pillars. It's about as thrilling as it sounds. Let's talk about fleens. Can we talk about fleens for 1 minute, please? If you're asking yourself, but what even is a fleen? Get out, now. This video is for serious analysis only. Right, now that I'm speaking only to my peers, let's briefly summarise what fleens are as a recap. Fleens are basically exactly like Zoombinis, except instead of being blue and round, they're green and not very safe for work. They are the yang to the Zoombinis' yin. Is it yin or ying? Hang on. I checked, it's yin, I was right. Just like there's a little bit of fleen in every Zoombini, there's a little bit of Zoombini in every fleen. When you encounter the fleens, you're actually trying to infiltrate their territory. They have very clear signs up denoting that this land belongs to the fleens, but the Zoombinis don't seem to care. The trick to solving this minigame is figuring out which of your Zoombinis correlates to which fleen, and then making sure that the 3 fleens on the branch with the beehive on it run off so the bees come out and chase all the fleens away. Very simple premise. It's a fun little minigame. I like it a lot. I like it every time I see it. It's different every time. Good stuff. 8 out of 10. I'm gonna start applying ratings from this point onwards. So this one's an 8. I'm sure there's a lot to unpack with the geopolitical analysis of Zoombinis and fleens. That might be an episode for another day. Also, sometimes as you're entering the pizza minigame, one of the trolls goes,
Fleens? You're not fleens.
which proves that the fleens do travel around. Further evidence that the fleens move around is found in the next minigame, which is a hotel, which seems to be built for small little creatures and run by a squirrel. On easy difficulty and medium difficulty, this minigame's kind of a joke, but as soon as you hit hard, it actually becomes really, really difficult, to the point where sometimes I only get 1 or 2 Zoombinis through. Essentially, once you place your first Zoombini, you then need to figure out how the graph builds from there. So sometimes all the Zoombinis with ponytails have to go in one vertical column, or something along those lines, or Zoombinis with ponytails and blue noses go in a vertical column. It's really confusing, and then later on they start adding locked doors, so you can basically, with your first move, make it impossible to get everyone through. Not the biggest fan of this one. 5 out of 10. This next one though, I like this one. It's got buttons to push, it's got things that go splat, it's honestly just an excellent minigame. And best of all, it's got absolutely nothing to do with the appearance of your Zoombinis, which is always a plus for me. You need to shoot ink at the squares with dots on, and you need to figure out what shape and paint colour corresponds to what area on the wall. It's great fun, and then when you hit it, all the Zoombinis get shot up into the air and they land, and it's really fun. This is, I think, in my top 3 minigames in the game. So I'm going to give this one a 9.2 out of 10. We're now approaching the final 3 minigames, the first of which is sadly another complete joke. You've got to line the Zoombinis up on the tiles in front of this lion, and until you hit hard difficulty, it is really, really easy, like the easiest minigame that exists. It gets a little bit harder when you're given less information, but honestly, I don't want to talk about this one for much longer because there's not much to say. 1 out of 10. Cringe. Next comes a minigame that on easy difficulty is another offensive joke, but once you start hitting the harder difficulties is actually quite a lot of fun. You have to arrange the Zoombinis and these mirror things. They're not mirrors, they're lenses. Yeah, lenses. You have to arrange the lenses in such a way that the 2 Zoombini pictures match. On easy, you're literally matching a Zoombini with a picture and that's it. However, once you get on the hard difficulty, you have to adjust the images of the Zoombinis using the lenses, and it's quite fun, if a bit time consuming. I'm gonna give this one a 6 out of 10. And now we come to the final minigame, the last barrier preventing the Zoombinis from reaching Zoombiniville. Is it called Zoombiniville before they arrive? Well, the sign's there before they get there, so I'm gonna say yes. In any case, this minigame, you gotta get Zoombinis in bubbles and get them across a grid. This is another minigame which on easy and medium is not very difficult, but once you hit hard, it actually becomes very tricky to get all of these lads through. It becomes an exercise in figuring out the correct order before you send any Zoombinis through, because once certain switches have been flipped, it becomes impossible to get some of the gang across. So it's quite a clever minigame, there's quite a lot to it, but it actually highlights one of the big issues I have with this game, which is that you're not given much space to sort your Zoombinis. They had 20 years to fix it. Get it together, Zoombinis. Anyway, this minigame's going to get a 7 out of 10. As I mentioned, the laser grid is the final barrier that prevents you from getting to Zoombiniville, a paradise completely untouched by fleens for some reason, despite the fact that they seem to be pretty well known in this land. Don't know why the fleens don't want to go there. Maybe there's something wrong. Maybe the Zoombinis haven't picked a good spot. Could be on top of an active volcano for all I know. But anyway, when you get groups of Zoombinis through, they start building these little monuments in Zoombiniville, and it's all very nice, and you get to see it develop as you proceed. But honestly, I cannot see anyone getting to the point where they get all 400 Zoombinis. Yeah, that's right, 400. All 400 of them to Zoombiniville. I can't see anyone having the patience for that other than a tiny little child. And you can say this game was made for children, but I don't know, man. There's some pretty heavy themes in this game. We're talking about colonialism, we're talking about acceptance, we're talking about fleens. These are themes that children's brains simply cannot process. Does this game hold up to modern scrutiny? No. Is the minigame where you make pizzas and put ice cream toppings on stuff and then give it to trolls still really, really fun? Yes, it is. Yes. Yes, it is. If you are looking for a game where you design a pizza and put toppings on an ice cream and then give that to a troll that looks like a tree and see if they like it, this is the game for you. I cannot stress this hard enough. This is the one. If you have any exciting ideas to lend to the growing field of Zoombinology, I urge you to leave them in the comments. Any ideas presented in the comments immediately become legal property of Games on Hard Mode.